one of the concerns of a lot of people, even that have committed to vote Conservative, is why are these guys going to be any different than Justin Trudeau and the Liberals?
I don't think it's possible for any new government to possibly be involved in more corruption than the current Liberal Party.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Tanya.
And today we have another interview that we've been very excited about. We've been trying to hook up with one of the other candidates of record, this time out of NDG Westmount. I have a hard time saying that, which... the acronym, if you didn't catch us in our last interview with Derek Gladue, it is Notre Dame de Grâce, Westmount. So that's what NDG stands for. So we're going to be talking to him about why he joined politics, why he's with the Conservative Party, and what he thinks he's going to be bringing to Canada. So without further ado, Matthew, welcome to Northern Perspective.
Thank you for having me. I'll jump right in and say why I got into politics or how I got into politics. I was a kid in CEGEP. So for those outside of Quebec that don't know, CEGEP is the after high school but before university schooling system that Quebec invented as a transitionary step for students before they get into the university life. And Stephen Harper had just lost his election to Justin Trudeau. As someone who wanted to pursue a business degree, the state of our economy was something I was really interested in. And I knew that when Stephen Harper on the campaign trail was mentioning that Justin Trudeau would take on debt onto the average taxpayer's shoulders in order to fuel what he said to be infrastructure spending and certain social projects that he said would yield great results for Canadians. Those were things that I said sounded too good to be true. So I started doing my research, started getting more involved. And then there was a gentleman at my CEGEP who said, Matthew, do you want to join the conservative club that I'm starting on campus? You say that you like the idea of balanced budgets. You say that you like the idea of having a strong, secure country in terms of border intelligence. You say that you want free trade with free trade agreements with multiple countries. I started espousing ideas that he was really liking, the idea of having a small government, lower taxes. I could just go on, but those are the ideas I started going along with in CEGEP. And then I started actually learning about federal politics as a whole. And that's where I met Derek at my local NDG Westmount conservative riding annual general meeting. And so when I met him there and I met his wife, Tanya, they instantly were two people that I wanted to learn off of. They had so much to share in terms of knowledge. I felt like a sponge and I started absorbing everything. And from there, I just joined the board. I joined the executive, and every other year that someone would ask me, hey, Matthew, do you want to take a little bit more responsibility on your shoulders? Do you want to learn a little bit more? I started going to conservative conventions. I started participating in policy discussions with people across different ridings, not just my own. And then from there, I was asked during COVID in 2021, hey, Matthew, do you want to potentially run for NDG Westmount? It would be a great opportunity for you to throw your name into the hat. And if anyone wants to contest you, they can. But it would be a great opportunity for you to learn what it's like to execute a campaign and what it's like to deal with Elections Canada and so many other valuable skills that I think are needed on the federal level. And from there, I ran my first campaign, and then I dealt with a by-election being thrown at me last summer, which was really fun. 5.5 weeks to get 3+ months of work done. And I did what I could and I worked really hard, but that's sort of been the timeline of how I got into politics.
That's fascinating because, as I'm sure a lot of Canadians know, it traditionally hasn't been the younger crowd that actually, moves to the conservative side. Traditionally it's, you come out of college or university or high school and you're typically a liberal, and then at some point you really start caring about your money, and then you start shifting your thought processes and priorities over to the conservative side. So, but based on what you're saying, sounds like you were born and bred conservative right out of the gate. And we've been looking, at some of your media, some of your profiles. So for those that don't know, Mathew has been endorsed by Jean Charest, and it'd be is there a good story as to how you met Jean Charest and received his endorsement?
Well, it's a little bit of a funny story, but really we happen to live very close to one another within the riding. And so I would see him in the riding at points. I would see him driving maybe down a particular street. He's a very hard person to miss, especially growing up in Quebec and seeing him as our premier. You notice him when he's somewhere in public. And so that is where I started seeing him. But where we kind of connected was through various people that I would meet in the riding. People would say, Mathew, a really nice guy. I know Jean Charest. I'm going to put in a good word for you. Hopefully we could get you in touch with one another, that sort of thing. And, at a certain point, I got into contact with his son, and Antoine was very nice and put me in touch with his father. And his father told me, Jean Charest, he said, Mathew, I've had 3-4 people come to me now talking about you. I had to look into it for myself. I wanted to talk to you. Tell me some of your ideas. Tell me what you believe in as a conservative. And we had a brief conversation. And I think once he saw the values that I espouse, and especially where I come from in terms of an educational background and what I want to achieve there, I think we aligned on a lot of issues. And I think that's where his endorsement came from.
There's obviously a lot of momentum building towards the Conservatives. We've seen that over the last couple of years. Because you've been involved in your electoral district association for a long time now, you've been no doubt paying attention to what's been going on across the country in terms of the support that is really building for the Conservatives. What do you think is the reason for that? Obviously, we hear a lot about Justin Trudeau and the scandals, but I think it's more than that. The Liberals have traditionally been center left. The Conservatives, I would say, are center right, and there was obviously that ideological gap between them. But do you think something has happened to the Liberal Party that Canadians are really starting to realize, or do you think there's something else going on?
If I had to say, I think it's a mix of the two. I think, or at least in my opinion, the center-left parties of the world are starting to get dragged further and further towards the left. I think that's playing a huge part. And then you have people that are traditional, let's just say liberals or Democrats. I'm just going to use both as an example. And they're feeling as if their original train has departed them. And then they find themselves in an iffy position because they know they'll never really vote the other way. But then they're so unhappy with their current state of affairs in their own party that they don't really know what to do. So that's like one bulk of people. And then the other bulk of people are the traditional liberals or Democrats that are saying, wow, this is going in a real direction that I don't like. And there are some things that I'm starting to hear on the other side that is willing to give me enough confidence to at least vote for them this time around. Because like I said, the state of affairs in their own party is so troubling that they have no other choice but to seek other alternatives that better align with their value system.
Let's talk about those center left voters that have realized, as you say, that their train has left the station and it's gone due west. Of those voters that they don't know what to do, what would your message be to those voters that are in your riding in order to persuade them to vote Conservative in the next election?
My number one message is I want you to understand where I come from. I'm from a family of accountants. Really, what I want to do is I want to be able to invest in a lot of the same programs that people in my riding would love to see. And the issue is that we need to achieve a balanced budget in order to be able to spend on those programs. That's something that I consider myself to just be a part of, in the sense of being fiscally conservative. And then when it comes to social policies, I don't like to say that I'm liberal, but I'm definitely centered down the middle when it comes to social issues. And I want people to know that there's all different types of conservatives out there too. And that doesn't mean that there's any issue with having different types of conservatives. It just means we have a big tent in our party. We have Albertan conservatives, we have Quebec conservatives, we have energy conservatives, we have farming conservatives. The list goes on and on. So my biggest pitch to voters is, understand that there's many different types of conservatives out there, but I'm willing to devote an endless amount of time to be able to meet as many people as possible, for them to know that my value system as a Quebec conservative aligns with them a lot more than they might think.
So of the people that you've been meeting with, just, everyday Canadians, what are some of the major concerns that people are bringing to you?
If I had to say a top three, number one is something to do with the economy, whether it be housing affordability, food affordability, wages not keeping up with inflation. If I could just put that all under one umbrella, I think that would be the number one. Believe it or not, number two in my riding is climate change. I get that all over my riding, and that's why I'm very passionate about climate change, because that's the thing I learned in my first election the most, is that there is a real desire for local representation to discuss climate change and to find very productive and efficient ways to tackle climate change. And that's why I think the Conservative Party offers that, because they truly weigh the cost and the benefit of every investment as it relates to climate change, where I think the other parties sort of just say the ideas first and don't really weigh the costs of it. And then when they get around to campaigning, then it starts getting costed out in the media, and it doesn't really hold much value. That's something that's very important to me, climate change. And number three, I would just say safety. If I could create another umbrella under there, whether it be the amount of stolen cars on the island of Montreal, whether it be just general immigration safety. I know there's a lot of concerns with the amount of immigrants that we have coming into the country and the infrastructure that we have to actually support them. I mean, the list goes on and on, but those were the top three. So the economy, climate change, and just safety and reasonability of a lot of the policies that the Liberals have imposed on Canadians.
So let's talk about climate change a bit, because that comes up a lot. The Liberals would have everybody believe they have the most, I'm going to try and quote Stephen Guilbeault as closely as I can. This is the most ambitious and comprehensive climate plan in Canadian history. So you're a conservative that is mindful and passionate about the fact that there is a changing climate right now. So I'm guessing you agree that what the Liberals have is not a climate plan. So how would you characterize the Liberal approach to climate change, and what do you see, either ideas from yourself, or what do you see the Conservatives putting into place as a plan to tackle the concerns for the environment?
So on a personal level, I'll start personal, then I'll speak more on behalf of the party in the ways that I can. Personally, when I see greenhouse gas emissions going up year over year, when I see us not meeting our Paris targets or even coming remotely close, and yet the amount of money that our government spends per year going up on climate change action policy, going up every single year, I just see an inversely correlated situation, and that's just not a way to enact policy in a government. So on a personal level, if we put $1 into climate action, we should be able to get $1 back in social good. And that's how I see it. Maybe it's too much like an accountant, but that's how I see it. We should be able to say that if we're going to spend, just throwing a number out there, $5 billion on climate over the next X amount of years, we should see a costed out model where the Society of Canada is getting back $5 billion in returns in that same amount of time. If not, we need to reevaluate the cost benefit analysis of that policy, because it's just not working. And that could be applied to everything else other than climate change. Same with tax benefits, you need to cost it out. It seems like the Liberals have completely been out of touch with the concept of a cost benefit analysis when it comes to any policy. They basically start by stating the benefits. They say, oh, we'll worry about the costs later. And then they deal with the costs now, which is having a record number of Conservatives showing that Pierre Poilievre would win almost a super majority in government right now. But that's on the personal level. For the party itself, I think that Pierre and his team of his communications team have a very effective way of speaking to the average voter. And I think that when the party is going to formally release their policy platform for the next election, I could very well see something that will make not only sense when you hear it, because, to a lot of people, when Justin Trudeau or the Minister of the Environment speaks on climate policy, it sounds good to the ear. But when you actually take a pen and paper and start breaking it down, there's not a lot of tangible weight there.
Yeah, because it comes up a lot for us, and obviously the Liberals and Stephen Guilbeault constantly talking about the carbon tax, constantly talking about these other alleged initiatives that are tackling climate, and none of them are obviously working. I'm kind of a numbers guy myself. I like numbers, and I look at it like this. Canada accounts for 1.5, 1.6% of global carbon emissions. There's debate whether, that is the metric to use, but we'll just use that metric. And from what I see from the Conservative plans and kind of like piecing it together, to me, what makes the most sense is we don't look at Canada as a separate island away from the world in terms of our carbon emissions. The climate plan that Canada should have, in my opinion, has actually nothing to do with reducing Canada's 1.6% carbon emissions, because there's only going to be so much that we can do. And if you really want to eliminate that 1.6%, you are going to have to spend hundreds of billions of dollars in order to do that, and you're not going to see that return back.
Well, and also it's difficult for the Canadian people. I mean, look how much we've suffered with this carbon tax. That's not helping anybody.
So to me, I think what they're doing is looking at this from a global perspective in terms of if we can really invest more in producing and extracting our natural gas, exporting that to these countries that burn coal and replace that coal with natural gas. Now we're talking in terms of reducing global carbon emissions, because you're helping those other countries. So we need to be looking, not just the average Canadian's carbon footprint. We need to be looking at the global carbon footprint and that net effect that the Canadian ingenuity and economy can have on that. And I think that's how we should be measuring that. Am I close?
No, you're spot on. And that's why I'll actually bring up an author. You might be familiar with his work. I'm not sure, but it's Bjorn Lomborg. He has a lot of literature I think he works at the Copenhagen Institute. He has a lot of work on this, basically just saying that if, let's just say, he doesn't use Canada, I don't think, as a specific reference, but if we were to just take your number that you had put up, I think 1.6%, let's slash that in half. We spend endless amounts of money to reduce the global impact by 0.8%. If we were to just help the top 5 polluting countries, and I'll just throw a few of them out there. If you have China, you have Bangladesh, and a few other of these countries, if we can form some sort of team, international team, where we can help these countries get off of coal faster, like you mentioned, the net effect would surpass what we'd be able to do in Canada by far. I think that the issue is that you have the NDP, the Green Party, and the Liberals say that, well, you don't care about the Canadian impact on the world stage, and they start throwing in that argument. And in reality, I think it's more of a numbers argument. But a lot of people say, well, if you're not even willing to take care of the issues you have in your own country, how can you help other countries? And so it becomes that circular argumentation situation where they bring that up. But I'm totally with you. I think that that's where the Conservatives are really going to try and make an impact, is with countries that haven't excelled as much as us in terms of, getting off of coal and having other solutions for certain things that we do. Like, for example, hydroelectric dams. It's not possible in every type of region, in every type of country, but perhaps we can help countries that do have that capability get there, and maybe we could form some alliances there too with some new free trade deals, and in return of free trade, maybe we could help them in the environment as well. So I think there's a lot of potential to cross-coordinate economic deals with climate deals, because that's the future. You're not going to be able to strictly have an environment or economic focused policy agenda. You're going to have to intertwine them and sort of make those decisions together.
And what would you say to some voters that say, well, the climate's always changing, there's nothing we can do about it? What do you say to those people?
I would say that, I have met a lot of those people, is that if the environment is constantly changing, it's still impacting a certain percentage of the world in a negative way. And I'm not saying that Canada needs to be the solution to all the world's problems in every case, but I'd like to say that we have some very smart people in this country. And if there's a way that we could help some countries that are a bit more impoverished than ourselves, and help people prevent death of natural disasters caused by an accelerating climate changing, then I think that's what we should do. I think we should at least intervene in some way and share our technology, share some of our business acumen, and be able to help them achieve more safety in their country. And in the same time, maybe we will be able to get something back one day in a deal of trade or whatever commodities that country has to offer. Hopefully we can help them, they could help us, and we could form stronger alliances across the world.
Let's get into safety.
Absolutely.
Big topic of concern, and I think this it will dovetail into an interesting question afterwards, but I'll ask the first one. In terms of safety across the nation, we've seen violent crime increase by more than 50%, and we have seen here in Ontario just tragedies in terms of stories of people being arrested, released the same day, and then ending up, causing a tragedy on the Highway 401, or, other families being injured, being killed by these same people. This is not isolated to Ontario. I believe it crosses the whole country. So, what is your message to voters when they talk about safety, and what the Conservatives and yourself will advocate for?
Well, I think two things, and Pierre is very vocal about this himself, is jail and not bail, right? He repeats it 3 times over: jail, not bail, jail, not bail, jail, not bail. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to have difficult conversations with Canadians and explain that if we do not set a precedent for violent repeat criminals, that this will just continue over and over again. Not only that, I think the federal government needs to be tougher in its rhetoric with municipal and provincial governments about what is happening on our streets across the country. We're letting a lot of protests spiral into violent riots. We're allowing a lot of free speech that trickles along the hate speech lines and then trickles into illegal speech, and action just go completely unfiltered. And we can't do that either. We need to be able to at least set a precedent that if people are chanting for the death of Jews in our streets, the federal government either needs to act themselves or put severe pressure on provincial and municipal governments to do more. I think we need to have these difficult conversations with Canadians, because we are going down a very dangerous path where a lot of people feel emboldened by the various governments' levels of inactivity when it comes to just being tough on criminality. And as a result, in a few years, we may see an increase of 50% compared to now. And if we're already dealing with a 50% increase curve, we can only imagine what we would see in a few years from now if the rate of change does not decrease.
So the dovetail question that this leads to is your main competition in your riding is going to be obviously the Liberals and the Bloc, no doubt. So given that the Bloc is viewed by Canadians as essentially just a provincial party, but in the government, what is your main selling point to differentiate yourselves against the Bloc? Because I think they're probably your main competitor. So how do you from a policy perspective win over people that may feel a certain loyalty to the Bloc Québécois, since that's the province they live in, versus a party that represents all of Canada?
I think it's a great question. You'd be surprised, but the Bloc Québécois actually in my by-election placed in 5th place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because the NDP does quite well here, often coming in second. I was only shy by, I think, 59 votes from second place to the Liberals, which was tough because I really thought we had done enough to get that second place. I call it a second place victory in my riding. But you'd be surprised. I think that in this riding in particular, it's divided into, you have a pool of Conservatives that are growing. And I could tell you, since being in this riding for the last 7 years, I do see a shift. I don't know how big that shift has been since last summer, because I know that a lot has happened in just 1 year. But what I can say is that the NDP supporters feel very discouraged in this riding. They feel abandoned by their party leadership. The Green Party deputy leader, Jonathan Pedneau, ran in my riding in my last by-election. And I think he performed the strongest for the Greens in the history of the riding, if I'm not mistaken, or if he came very close. And then you also had the Conservatives. So already those are the 4 parties. And I think the Bloc did slightly worse than the Greens, coming in 5th. But to actually answer your question, the Bloc Québécois, to be honest with you, when I meet Bloc Québécois voters, they're pretty set in their ways. They're pretty set in their beliefs. And I do see a world where the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois would be able to work together to make Quebecers happy. I'm not saying in any form of a coalition or anything, but I do think there'd be a lot of policies where we can work with the Bloc to ensure that Quebecers are happy with a Conservative majority government at the helm.
Yeah, we can see that because in committee, which we follow a lot, as you know, there's a lot of collaboration we see between the Bloc and the Conservatives, and the Bloc have a lot of strong MPs, very, very strong MPs. It's a pity they weren't Conservative, but you can see there is a lot of alignment in at least core principles and even morality when it comes to corruption. So it will be interesting to see what happens there. And on the topic of corruption, I think this is probably at the top of mind of a lot of Canadians. I don't remember a government that has had this many scandals. Maybe it's social media. Maybe it's just this is the most corrupt government in Canadian history. But one of the concerns of a lot of people, even that have committed to vote Conservative, is, okay, I'm going to vote for the Conservatives, but why are these guys going to be any different than Justin Trudeau and the Liberals? How do we know that they're not just going to get in and with a supermajority be even more untouchable and be able to act as corruptly as they want? Why is it different when it comes to the Conservatives?
Well, I think the first easy answer, and then I'll give the real difficult answer afterwards. The real answer is that I don't think it's possible for any new government to possibly be involved in more corruption than the current Liberal Party. I really believe that it would take a lot, because you would think that just with the amount of consulting and PR representatives that represent the Liberal machine, you would have thought that they would get away with a lot. And I think that we are doing a very good job at exposing that to the Canadian public, and they're picking up on it, and I couldn't be happier for that. But the more difficult answer is that now, with Canadians feeling so disenfranchised with their own government, we have an added layer of responsibility to be able to lead with courage, with honesty, transparency, accountability. I could say all the words, but we have that added layer of responsibility that we need to show Canadians, and they're going to be expecting results fast. And we need to be able to step up to the plate and be able to say we're willing to pull up our bootstraps, work extra hard, and be able to deliver in a real transparent way. So is there a way that I can prove it to you now? No. But the best way I can say is meet your local Conservative candidate that will be running, get to meet them, and you'll see that, at least I like to hope that as myself, I'm an honest person, a nice person that I'd love to work with so many different people. But meet your local candidate and get to know them, because there's a good chance that in the next election, they'll be your government representative, and you want them to know exactly what you want in government.
It's good because there's, in the MPs that we've talked to, and we've spoken to a number of them, they not only have a strong passion for Canada that comes across, but they have a strong sense of integrity as well. You look at people like Larry Brock, Michael Barrett, Kelly Block, and a few others.
Yeah, let's shout out to our MP, Dan Muse. Dan
Muse, man of impeccable integrity. It comes across to us that if things start to go off the rails, they're not just going to sit back and follow the leader. And this is in no way saying that Pierre Poilievre is going to go off the rails, but we actually posed this question to Larry Brock in an interview that we did with him, and said, what if you're in this position that all of the Liberals were? And he said that he'd be marching into Pierre's office and giving him a piece of his mind and telling him that I don't abide by this. And that's really good news. And it's, I think, music to the ears of most Canadians, because if a party can't hold itself to account, then that's a problem within our Westminster system, because there's no other way that we can deal with that. So with individuals such as yourself that have a passion for Canada, want to do right by Canadians, I think you're right. Talk is cheap, and it's going to come down to, I think, the first 6 months of government for Canadians to see, okay, show me. I've given you the responsibility, show me.
Yeah, I think it's like a probation period whenever you have a new employer. They're going to be looking at you extra finely during that time. They're going to be making sure they watch every one of your moves, and they will be critical if they don't like a move, because they hold all the cards. And I'm not saying that in the sense that the Canadian public can come back 6 months later and force the government to resign. That's not what I'm saying. But I would say that if a new government comes into power and they're not delivering quickly, the media, especially the Canadian media, will find every opportunity to say that Pierre and his government aren't doing enough. And I think that the MPs and the candidates that are in the pipeline understand that and are willing to put in that extra effort to make sure that Canadians feel that we're delivering.
So speak of an election, the next general election can be up to about a year away. But I think you have an advantage over other new candidates that will be running in that general election, is that you've already been through a by-election. So what sort of things did you learn during that by-election that you think you can apply to the general?
So the great thing is that when I did my first general election, I also had about 5.5, 6 weeks, because I was one of the last candidates to get confirmed in all of Canada. So, and then I had a by-election come up and had 5.5 weeks. So it was like half a week less compared to my first run around. And so in the end, I said, well, I haven't been really used to a full campaign period. What I will say is that I know how to work fast. I know how to put together a team fast. I know how to raise enough funds for a campaign fast. And I think that's a very valuable skill, because when sometimes you're given 3 times as long to achieve a goal, you'll subconsciously take that extra time to get the goal done, and you'll you won't give it your all. But for me, I see it as almost like an extra perk, being able to have that extra time. So I'll be able to apply the same amount of effort as if I had 5.5 weeks, but I'll have 3 times as much time to actually implement other strategies that I didn't simply have the time to do originally. Like, just to be able to sign a contract for radio ads and stuff like that, and to be able to implement that could take 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, and then you're already close to halfway done the campaign period in a by-election. So these are the things that I'm looking forward to be able to say, well, now I have a proper campaign schedule, and let me implement it with an aggressive strategy, and I think I'll be able to get a lot more done.
If you had a message for Canadians as to how you would plan to heal the divides in this country that have occurred under the Liberals over the last 9 years, it seems like one of the main core agendas, whether they meant it or not, the effect is it seems like they are trying to pit neighbor against neighbor, family against family, friend against friend. How do we heal this country?
I would say by trying your best to find common ground. I have worked with, just for example, Anthony Housefather before on when I was on my board of directors for my university in the student union. I went to Anthony Housefather. I was able to work with him on a personal level to be able to devise a strategy to implement anti-BDS policy at Concordia University. I'm very thankful for being able to work with him on that project. I think it's about finding common ground with people that you don't necessarily have the same political opinions as. I have a very good friend of mine. He was the former president of Liberal Concordia when I went to Concordia University, very good friend. And we're able to get past our political divides because we're able to have respectful two-way discussions. We're able to find the common ground and the common love for Canada. And when you're able to really just understand that there's a common love for the country, all else is just a matter of conversation. Because a lot of, like you said, the media, a lot of social media groups, a lot of politicians are trying to create such a big divide that people are almost trapped in their own echo chambers of speaking to people only in their party and only in their ideological circles. I think we need to break past those silos and understand that even if we found common ground with 20% of the people that we work with, we'd be able to get a lot more done as a totality.
Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight, Matthew. It has been a treat. I have a feeling we could probably talk for another 3 hours, but
absolutely,
time is of the essence for yourself as well as for us. But good luck in the upcoming election, whenever it may be, and we hope to see you back on Northern Perspective.
Thank you so much, and I will gladly be back whenever you're willing to have me. So thank you again, and have a great evening.